Names having power is a trope in a lot of different places. Sometimes knowing, for example, a demon or other otherworldly being's true name gives you the ability to essentially bind them to your will to some degree. And even without that, a name is a hint towards what something is about, at least in fiction. Like, you don't name something Evil Murder Forest without it being an evil forest where murder happens. And if it isn't, you did that with the intention of playing on people's expectations. It doesn't need to be that specific either, of course, as something generically named the Darklands or something like that is going to put images in your mind. The specifics might vary from person to person, but no one's going to imagine themselves taking a pleasant vacation there for a holiday. So with that in mind, Shadowfell. It ain't the greatest of places around. I'd say there are worse places to be sure, but when I have to think about a literal hell to find one, you can safely assume that it's not a great realm to be in. Gloomy, dark, and deathly, the Shadowfell is certainly no walk in the park, but it's oftentimes the gloomiest of places with the most interesting of plots and adventures can happen, so how about we take a peek at this mess of a realm? After all, the things that go bump in the night need a home too, and once necromancy is on the table, I'm immediately interested in a location no matter how horrible it might be. So what's the overall deal with this place? Well, early on in the history of D&D in-universe, the reality soup that was everything was forged into something a bit more consistent, the prime material. A lot of the remnants and tattered scraps of unused material, however, began to coalesce. These shadowed aspects of reality came together until they appeared almost as a mirror of the material world, but one far darker, gloomier, and oppressive. Filled with just as many creatures as the material, though twisted as if in a funhouse mirror, thus is how the Shadowfell exists and came to be. It's also where the dead go before they end up in whatever afterlife they're off to, a nice bit of purgatory before heaven or hell. Because of this, being known as the Raven Queen has set up shop there, both because it gives her some power and influence and because I think she just finds it kinda neat. The whole mirror thing is important to take note of. It's a trait it shares with the Feywild, but in reverse. The tower in the prime material might have an equivalent in the Feywild be a shining marble structure covered in vibrant plants. In the Shadowfell, it'll be a gloomy ruin where the shadows seem to move in the corner of your eye. It's the vibe of Silent Hill before the monsters start attacking, though of course you can find plenty of those here too. None of this is to say it's all doom and gloom. There's treasure to be found here that's worth seeking, and in some areas, particularly those where other planes intersect and interlopers can be found, the darkness is driven back. But by and large, we have a depressing sort of afterlife where everything is dark and sad. Reaching this place, especially for a realm of darkness, is actually quite easy, to the point that some people get here on accident. Shadow crossings are places where it intersects with the prime material, some of which are intentionally created and others which occur naturally after some catastrophe or planar intersection happens. I'm not going to say they're everywhere, that'd be insane, but they are common enough that countless superstitions about them exist. Peasants and nobles alike will make prayers to their gods and sides of warding off evil before crossing a shadowy doorway lest they fall in, that sort of deal. It's not at all true that any random patch of darkness will take you in, but it is true there's enough of them that people pray to avoid it with some frequency. And in saying that, on a former battlefield, it's not a bad idea to actually do just that and pray it away. Such massive amounts of death and therefore souls going to the Shadowfell tend to create such junctions, though I'd argue those ones are very temporary. Most of them, in fact, are only active at certain times, typically during events where darkness is prevalent, like eclipses, new moons, or the shortest day of the year. They all safely deposit you in a correlating location in the Shadowfell, but they don't always let you walk right back through afterwards. That'd be far too easy for your party to get away from your railroading, after all. Entrances can also be activated through the Shadow Passage ritual, and of course traditional portals are also an option. Those are a bit creepy since they ooze shadow and darkness, but unlike Princess the Pitbull, they ain't actually gonna hurt ya. Once you're in, it's like I said earlier, a darker reflection of reality. It's a stable realm to be sure, there's not gonna be reality ripping in half at a moment's notice, but what might be a pleasant mountain range in the prime material will in the Shadowfell be a jagged and foreboding series of peaks that are dangerous to traverse. A long but otherwise unnoteworthy road in the material realm might here be one that crosses dark ravines and near other dangerous features, and will be worn out and in disrepair. Also, the cities here that are reflections of material cities tend to be full of the undead. Whether or not they're sapient or zombie apocalypse undead is likely going to be up to how much shit your DM wants to give you at a given moment. Much more actively threatening, however, are domains of the dead. These are regions of the Shadowfell ruled by a particularly powerful and typically evil creature such as a vampire lord. Some can be as small as a little keep on the hill, others vast domains that spread out for miles, but all of them are under the control of their master. This is where some tricky nonsense can happen, with the conditions and perhaps even land itself changing and altering to fit the mood of its master. faster. Getting into one tends to be easy, just trip into it, but escaping usually requires some sort of pain-in-the-ass effort to go through. Kill the lord of a domain, break a curse or a seal, that kind of deal. As for some other threats, well, don't mind if I just get the ball rolling on the misery now. Supernatural energy runs throughout all of the Shadowfell to be sure, but it coalesces especially potently in some areas known as Darklands. These areas are not reflections of reality, but places where gloominess as a concept manages to manifest, like if a sad teenager was a realm of reality. They leech the life of anyone near them, and even color itself goes all monochrome and dull. They're usually short-lived as the magic eventually disperses, but sometimes they become permanent. For those, you should stay far away. Powerful undead such as vampires and liches are drawn to them, and chances are you'll become food for them if you stumble nearby. It should also be said that the entire realm makes you sad by being in it. A pervasive sense of melancholy afflicts anyone in here, turning you, in effect, into a sad teenager. Night and day do exist here. It isn't pure darkness, but the sun will be hidden behind clouds almost always, and the moon a dim, dismal thing often bathing the land in an eerie glow. It isn't actually warmer or colder in the Shadowfell, at least compared to whatever region it's mirroring in a given location, but a sense of chill and dampness is nonetheless felt. And mentally, you are drained. The longer you're here, the more hopeless you'll feel. Have you ever had a real bad day where getting out of bed and doing anything even as small as just showering is something too much? That's the Shadowfell after long enough for whoever's in here. Your objectives seem farther and farther away. Every step takes a monumental mental effort because what's the point of it all? Nothing actually stops you from doing what you're here for. It isn't a physical thing, but mentally, the Shadowfell wears you down with every passing minute. Oh, and there's necromantic seepage. It's bubbling pools of pure liquid necromancy. If you scoop some out, it turns into harmless flakes within a minute, but if you dive into one, you get something called goddamn soul rot, which, yeah, is an apt name. First you take necromantic damage, and if you don't treat it properly, it then weakens you before turning you into a wraith. Probably could be useful if you're playing a necromancer character, however, if you're clever enough to use it. As far as the inhabitants go, the wildlife here is exactly what you think it is. Ravens, crows, black beetles that eat your flesh, shadowhounds, ghostly panthers, and plenty of bats are your typical affair. If it's something you'd either see as a horror movie monster or unsubtly foreshadowing bad things to come in a story, you can find it here in spades. There's also the dead. They are most of the things here. Countless souls awaiting their final afterlife can be found in the Shadowfell, most only lingering for a few hours, but hey, people die all the time. I don't even mean that morbidly. Thousands of people in the real world die of perfectly natural causes. Some linger longer, however. Those who died with strong ties or unfinished business can remain stuck here for a time, and be it because they were full of hate or love when they died, they just can't move on. And sometimes a spirit can remain here longer if they were particularly strong in mortal life, because apparently you can be built so different your soul resists a true afterlife. You can freely walk up and ask any of these folks for information or help with your journey in some way, but they tend not to give such things for free. Free my unfinished business, give me a day in your body, which I'll try and steal at the end of it. That sort of deal. There are also living communities to be found. Typically, they're enthralled under the lords of one of those domains I mentioned earlier, but more traditional towns and cities can occasionally be found. However they ended up here, apparently enough people from humans to elves and more got stuck for long enough, they just set up shop. They by almost all accounts are entirely normal, with markets, inns, governments, and more. They're some of the safest places you can find here, but there's usually some twist to each. One village, for example, might have the hardest time keeping their dead from rising up to devour their flesh. No doubt an awkward thing to see grandma coming back in for a bite to eat. Others might have the opposite problem. You never die, but you keep aging into dirt. Rampaging hordes of the undead also tend to be an issue. As the gloomy land of the dead, necromancers, cults of the evil god Orcus, and all sorts of bad types have congregated here to do everything from evil research to using the energy of the Shadowfell to create foul abominations. A lot of the time, whenever they're done with a project, they just toss it into the Shadowfell at large, because when you're making a monster fused from 3 different people's souls, a bit of littering hardly seems that much worse. Sometimes certain areas like Darklands also just spawn undead. Zombies are a weather condition in this realm, that's right, and also sometimes those souls waiting for passage get corrupted because fuck you, guy who died 5 minutes too early. Vampires and liches, naturally bolstered by these energies, also reign here, oftentimes leading the various zombie hordes and other abominations in their own plots and schemes. Beings known as death giants might be some of the worst here. Long ago, a race of giants came to the Shadowfell. Giants in D&D being rather arrogant, they assumed they had the right to conquer this realm as they had others before it. And so they did, because giants are powerful and most things can't stop them, undead or not. The realm, however, didn't need to stop them. It corrupted them. It leached at their beings, weakening them and causing even their colossal strength to fade. The giants looked into solutions and found one, devouring the souls of those present around them. It halted their decay, and so they feasted on their newly departed. This stopped them from fading, but naturally, this twisted them. They became husks of their former selves mentally, savage beings just smart enough to know what keeps them going and how to swing a big club at anyone coming too close to tenderize their meal before consumption. They subjugate all those below them, as most of their original servants fled or were devoured, and even to this day, some still dwell in the ruins of their once mighty structures. The Dark Ones also bear special mention. Most likely the first beings in the Shadowfell, they awoke shortly after it formed. Confused, isolated, and a bit unnerved with their newfound existence, they were nonetheless filled with wonder over this world they found themselves in. When the Giants showed up, they all willingly became their servants, figuring that, hey, maybe that'll give us some purpose. The Giants, as discussed, then eventually began eating their souls. Most of the Dark Ones fled, and the few who stayed quickly found out that their delusions of being rewarded for service amounted to nothing more than becoming dinner. To avoid the Giants, those that fled took to the Underground, where the Giants hadn't had any real power. In the Shadow Dark, the reflection of the Underdark, did they dig tunnels and set up shop, though nowadays you can find them almost anywhere. They dislike most others, once bitten twice shy and all that, but they do get along with beings known as Shadowkai and are polite enough to everyone else. They tend towards thieving and other dirty work to survive, being distrustful of most others, but it should be said that a good amount of Dark Ones have properly integrated into society with other races and get along perfectly fine with them. Sometimes this is a ruse, but oftentimes they're just hanging around, cracking open a cold beer with the dwarf next door and living life. Always a fairly insular bunch and typically a few words, they're nonetheless not evil, as the Shadowfell itself isn't truly evil. They're just scarred by their history and afraid to let anyone else in, which by my estimation is entirely understandably so. When your early history is almost entirely eaten by necromancy giants, I get why trusting other people can be a bit difficult. There are a few places in the Shadowfell that bear special mention. First is the city of Gloomrot, because these places tend to have names like that here. It's a fairly tightly packed seaport, only about 12,600 people, but all of whom are jammed closely together. Ships from other Shadowfell ports and other realms outright visit here frequently, and most of the population that's naturally born here are humans, tieflings, halflings, and dwarves. A human named Prince Roland the Deathless is in charge of the city, though a conglomerate of barely interested in government merchants, as well as mysterious beings known simply as the Keepers, have plenty of power here as well. The town guard consists of 60 guys in Roland's employ who are broadly incompetent, and for proper protection, most of the merchants here employ their own guards as well. The citizenry also relies on the walls and surrounding march to keep out threats, which works more often than not. There's a few inns such as the Black Griffin and Dark Moon as well, though the Night Shield is easily the best and most hospitable of the ones you can find. Most outsiders come to this town by sea, because coming through the marshes blows. Hags, tentacled whatever the hells, and more await anyone trying that path, though if you can scrounge together 5 gold, a Dark One ferryman will take you across the marshes. No one's sure if they've made a deal with the creatures in the marshes, or practicing some sort of sorcery, or are just that good at their job, but if you can find one, it's about the most reliably safe way of getting through the marsh. The walls of the city sink deep into the muck and are harsh and ugly things, but they and the green lanterns surrounding the city keep the nonsense outside at bay. They even have decorations, stone hands, limbs, and even faces twisted in all sorts of visages. Also gargoyles, from which sometimes you can hear laughter echoing from as they twist and wreathe around whenever you look away. No one's sure who carved any of this, or indeed if anyone even did. The walls themselves were artificially built, but the Shadowfell might have had some ideas of its own on how to pretty them up, as it were. Once you're in, it's a crowded mess, like I said, with buildings jammed together at seemingly impossible angles and appearing to rise from the depths with little rhyme or reason. They crane inwards, and the alleys are a non-stop confusing nightmare, and the entire city occasionally shifts around. Sometimes new buildings just appear for a few months before collapsing into nothing, hopefully with no one in them, but I doubt that's always the case. No one knows why this happens except maybe Prince Roland, and he doesn't seem interested in telling anyone exactly why the house they built decided to collapse into rock and shadow. All sorts live here, with the most common being the races I listed above, but you can find anything. This includes liches, who presumably are here on evil business, but they keep things mostly civil within the city limits. Shadowkai nobles lounge around in pleasure dens, the merchants do merchant things, just more depressingly than normal, and the average person tends to turn a blind eye to the more shady and depraved parts of the city. Those keepers I mentioned also bear elaboration. From a distance, they look human, until you get close and notice the pale skin, total lack of hair, and clothing that totally covers them, including goggles over their eyes that hint at something more sinister. They walk around the city and appear to be inspecting it, talking to each other in a strange clicky voice, and then wandering off elsewhere. No one is sure if they even serve Prince Roland, and they might have something to do with why the city keeps reforming and then collapsing, but whatever they are, they're a common enough sight that no one bothers them. There's all that, and they also have the funniest defense mechanism ever. If you threaten one with violence, they just turn into goo and slurp into a canal somewhere. I've had some bad days, and I gotta tell you, I wish I could do that. For Prince Roland's part, he's ruled the city for 300 years, shows no signs of aging, and all his functionaries are distant descendants of his original children, great-grandchildren, great-great-great-grandchildren, and etc., having all died. Some say he's cursed to live forever, others say he's made a dark pact to prolong his life, but either way, he's a fixture of the city. And credit where it's due, he isn't a horrible ruler, nepotism aside. Be he cursed, blessed, or something else, he seems perfectly content just managing Gloomrot. Nice to see someone who knows the meaning of being content in this day and age of endless hustle culture garbage. A rather less pleasant realm is Letherna, the realm of the Raven Queen. A frozen land in an already chill dimension, all souls who pass through the Shadowfell as part of their afterlife journey also pass through Letherna. It truly is a realm of the dead, although at least for once in this place, most everyone here is simply dead spirits. The borders are easy to find, because when pine trees and snow start showing up everywhere like you walked into Narnia, you've arrived. The freezing temperatures and whatnot does a fine job keeping most people out, just as well as the monsters that dot the few paths that lead here do as well. Countless spirits line the roads, of course, but many of them are permanently trapped. Vengeful and insane wraiths or solemn specters, no small amount of things here are here to stay. I feel like at this point, I'd just like to quickly say that most spirits that pass through the Shadowfell do so without incident. It's just that by volume, there are more fates that suck ass compared to the one, but infinitely more common one that is meander for a bit and then go on to another afterlife. Far in the sky above, you can also see silvery ghosts racing across Letherna, like a really morbid aurora borealis. They streak towards distant mountains, and as you get closer, more and more are seen until you reach the mountains themselves and the Raven Queen's citadel. When the trees give way, you see the realm this goddess has carved out for herself in all its glory. There's black ice towers, walls, and ramparts that form an imposing structure that'll give pause to any who come here for any reason, and all those souls racing above enter her keep to await their final destination. All sorts of other creatures can be found here as well, being that for one reason or another, the Raven Queen is denied a final afterlife. Same as on the road, some may be kind, others malicious and thirsting for living meat and blood, more still simply accepting, but all live under her shadow and gaze. And our last major stop is Moyle, the city that waits. Once upon a time, Moyle was like any other city. Bit of a problem with using dark magics, but hey, no one's perfect. Eventually, when a cult of Orcus moved in, however, they realized they were a bit shit and did a moral 180. They threw out the cult of Orcus from power, stopped worshipping him themselves, and started worshipping the god Pelor instead. And then, Orcus threw the entire city into the Shadowfell. So deep into it did he throw Moyle that no light reached them again, and eventually everyone silently agreed to just close the door to their homes and never come back out, wasting away until the city of Moyle lied truly empty. Now the city is sinking into a pit of necromantic magic that constantly vomits out undead into the streets. The Lich Acerak once used it to ascend past mortal limits, but beyond that, there's nothing too noticeable about the city, aside from the fact it's funny it got thrown into the darkness dimension like a baseball. Now for a bit of a turn, let's talk about the Raven Queen goddess a bit. Ruling the Shadowfell as she does from her citadel known as the Fortress of Memories, many fear her but few actually know what exactly she does. She's quite aloof and enigmatic, and no one's sure of really anything about her. How powerful she may be or may not be, what she does, nothing. Even her form has only ever been described by madmen, which is rather unreliable as far as sources go, with everything from a gnarled humanoid raven to tangled roots that move to an elf that explodes into ravens being possibilities. She does occasionally interact with people, but even then it's in an offhand, vague sort of way. She'll send out her divine ravens to kidnap people she finds interesting and bring them to the Shadowfell. Then she just sort of watches them go insane. So I guess you can say she's certainly more evil than good, but she mostly just seems like an asshole to me. She also has issues with the gods Corellan and Lolth, and given one of her potential forms, she may have been an elvish god in ages past. Sniff sniff, Raven Queen, elf feet, yummy. Those Shadar-Kai beings I mentioned a few times, meanwhile, are her servants. She gives them orders via her raven, since that's, a gimmick the Raven Queen has. They're usually found right outside her Fortress of Memories, since they're a bit too scared to enter it, and they spend their free time reenacting rituals and ceremonies from before they were cursed to serve the Queen forever. They were once a race of elves, but whilst in the Shadowfell, you can see the gaunt, withered faces that they now wear, assuming they aren't wearing a mask outright, since they tend to do that out of shame. Sad stuff, but it also means the number of elven Balthasar Gelts is significantly higher than 0, so it balances out. They also can take on a more youthful appearance when sent out on a mission by the Queen, but they remain pale as a sheet. In a slight plus side, they can't really die since the Raven Queen just brings them back, so they tend to be rather cavalier about things like blood loss or not being decapitated. In spite of all this, they're, at least in my estimations, fairly friendly by this place's standards, offering advice to any attempting to beseech the Raven Queen. The way they serve her, by and large, is by going out into the world and grabbing emotions, or sometimes souls outright if she's feeling spicy. Even in the the first case, this will usually drain the life a bit out of whoever they grab it from, and for this reason you can find Shadowkai lurking around damn near anywhere, from battlefields and graveyards to an argument a divorced couple is having. Hey, emotions are emotions, and those are some damn strong ones. You can make damn good friends with the Shadowkai by grabbing a bit of the silt from the bottom of the river Styx, yes, the famous one, and giving it to them. Alternatively, give it to the Raven Queen for a Divine Blessing loot box. Maybe she'll give you a soul, or forgotten knowledge, or, hell, maybe she'll just give you some more HP. There's also things called Nightwalkers in this place, coming from a realm known as the Negative Plane. The Negative Plane is to the Shadowfell what the Shadowfell is to the Material Plane. Entering it can be done in ways similar to entering the Shadowfell, in fact, and the draining effect the Shadowfell has is exponentially worse there, draining you entirely of your life force. Surviving requires either protective magics or getting lucky, i.e., nothing but nat 20s rolled until you get out. Getting out, however, is the tricky part. See, a Nightwalker is released every time someone goes in. Unless you can get the Nightwalker back in, you're trapped. You better hope no one kills it either, because then you're stuck permanently in the Negative Plane. You can track them based on the being trapped in the Negative Plane that gave rise to one, because they usually go to places like what the trapped person would relate to. They aren't truly interested, however. They only exist to kill the living. And finally, we have Sorrowborn. Remember how I said the Shadowfell makes you inherently sad and melancholic by being in it? Well, sometimes those emotions manifest. You've got the angry, two-headed beasts that bicker until they find something to kill, the hungry, which what they do is probably pretty self-evident, the lonely, who are so desperate for companionship that they have harpoon arms they can launch at you to force you into a murderous hug, the lost, who are like the lonely in a lot of ways to be honest, and the wretched, who exist to feed on your life force. There are thankfully ways to handle them. Based on their names, you can probably guess they're all about a certain emotion. Counteracting them with an opposite emotion weakens them greatly. For the angry, for example, not fighting them confuses them and weakens them. Generally feeling positive is a good thing in general for all of them as well, though the wretched do give me pause because I don't really know the emotion that counteracts your life force getting drained. I guess not being alive is a good way to do it, but I mean, that's kind of what you're trying to stay, presumably. Now to end, how about we talk about running a game in the Shadowfell? In general, this place should be depressing. Your party should come back at least a little traumatized from the experience, especially if it's an extended stay there. Additionally, in that case, a plot about the Raven Queen or some undead monstrosity can never go wrong, but really anything goes ultimately. Wars between rival vampire lords can be fun, but if you want, then go ahead to Gloomrot and try and forge the most depressing mercantile endeavor ever seen. The true challenge in either case should be the pervasive despair this realm inflicts on you. The 5th Ed DM's Guide actually gives a handy way to get that done. Whenever you think it's fitting, though probably no more than once a day unless you're absolutely tormenting your players with heinous shit, make a wisdom saving throw of 10. On a fail, the player falls into despair. You've got a d6 of things that can happen, from outright madness to just disadvantage on death saving throws. Feel free to get creative and add some of your own while you're at it, I'd say. You can always just use a bigger dice to let more options be possible. These are hard challenges because it's a punishing realm that should be mentally draining to traverse, but don't feel too bad. After a long rest, you can make a DC 15 check to shake off the despair, and a Calm Emotion spell will handle it as well, so a well-equipped spellcaster can make it perfectly manageable in the Shadowfell if you do fail the initial save. And, hey, remember that the Shadowfell is a mirror of the material. Does your party have a nobleman they're friends with? Well, if they end up in the Shadowfell from his castle, congratulations! You stumbled across Dracula's castle, or the home of some lich, and presumably they won't be happy to have random assholes showing up like that. Exploring a city in the material? Well, in the Shadowfell, a vibrant medieval landscape gives way to a city where the dead don't rest easy, and everyone in it has to figure out how to deal with that. As long as it's depressing and the only people who'll get a kick out of it probably enjoy cock and ball torture, you can find it in the Shadowfell. And indeed, on that note, that was the Shadowfell. Miserable and depressing, but all in all, not the worst of places. Just avoid the necromancy death pits. Those are pretty nasty. As always, liking, subscribing, and commenting are appreciated. But even if not, thanks for watching, take care out there, and have a good one. I think the Shadowfell would be a lot cooler with giant robots in it that punched each other, and if you could jump on them to damage a weak spot or ride a friendly one mid-fight, and if instead of being called the Shadowfell it was called Titanfall. I want Titanfall back, that's what I'm getting at here. God damn it, Apex. Fuck you, Dutch. Pretty sure you said you play it. You're the reason I don't have Titanfall anymore.